So I am happy, more than happy, I'm ecstatic to introduce Barbara Cheives, who is the president and CEO of Converge and Associates Consulting. Converge specializes in race and ethnic relations consulting, employee relations, and community engagement. Converge has developed a training niche and cultural competency, implicit bias, respectful communication in the workplace, and workplace bullying and harassment. Their client base includes government entities, law enforcement and public safety, not-for-profit organizations, media, education, and corporations. Barbara has planned and executed county-wide community engagement and community dialogue projects with difficult to reach communities for the YWCA, Children's Home Society, and community partners of Palm Beach County, and statewide for the Florida Network of Youth and Family Services and the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. But wait, Barbara has also presented at state and national conferences for the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, HR Florida, Florida Network of Youth and Family Services, the YWCA, and the National Leukemia Lymphoma Society. She has designed and delivered workshops around youth violence prevention, disproportionate minority contact, and the portrayal of minorities in the media. Additionally, Barbara is a trained mediator, a certified ethnic trainer, and Palm Beach State College Center for Applied Ethics, and a national trainer for NeighborWorks America, a senior associate for Everyday Democracy at Hartford, Connecticut, and a trainer with the Racial Equity Institute in Greensboro, North Carolina. She served on the national board of the Institute of Community Peace in Washington, D.C., and on the board of the Lord's Place in Palm Beach County, which is an agency dedicated to breaking the cycle of homelessness. She is past president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Inc., West Palm Beach chapter, and co-chair of the Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church Social Justice Ministry. Barbara is an alumni of Leadership Palm Beach County from the class of 2002. Friends and family, I am pleased to present Barbara Cheives.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahimsa. All of that just means that Barbara doesn't sleep much. Whenever I hear that bio, I think, oh, I'm tired already. So I'm gonna, when I asked Ahimsa what you wanted to hear from me today, she said you wanted to talk about isms. And I thought the best way to talk about isms was to look at the biases that we all have, because those biases that we all have relate directly to our isms. So I'm giving you an abbreviated version of the implicit bias training that I do for cities and municipalities and government entities. So I'm gonna share my screen, hopefully with some success. And there we go. So Cynthia Simmons is coming in. Is somebody co-host with me or my host? Trish, I can't hear you.
I had made you host. If you want to make me co-host, I'll run both. I'm sorry about that. I should have.
I think I would have to stop sharing. That's okay. I can click people in if I see them on the screen.
Okay, my apologies.
That's okay. Not a problem. It's easy. Welcome, Cynthia. So defining and uncovering unconscious bias and looking at culture and implicit bias. So whenever I do a training or anything that I do, I start with the same group of guidelines and agreements because I think they're very important. Talking about race is not always easy. I always say that I talk about race like some folks talk about the weather, but it's not as easy for everybody as it is for me. So it's nice to have a set of guidelines to go with. So the first is to understand that we're all experts in our own experiences. And what do I mean by that? We've all lived a life. We've lived our life in different places, different countries, different communities, different parts of this country. We're different ages. So we come to this table this morning with lots of different experiences. And very often we'll look at TV or hear a conversation and say, why do people think like that? Why is that how they respond? Because it's their experience. So we've got to learn to respect other people's experiences and values and opinions because they're theirs. The other agreement is that we speak for ourselves and not for others. We tend to speak for our group or our tribe or whatever our piece of the world is. And we can't. And we tend to ask other people to speak for their entire group, and they can't. So I encourage us to speak for ourselves and not say what do my people think? Because I don't know what my people think. I only know what I think. Being non-judgmental is my funny agreement, because guess what we are? We're judgmental.
Judgmental.
Absolutely, we are. We judge people all the time. But I always ask that we working on being non-judgmental, because it takes a minute. It's not easy. My favorite agreement is say ouch and educate. Somebody in a conversation about race is more than likely to say something that people find offensive. I'm fairly certain that most people don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to go out and offend somebody today. We do it because we say things people find offensive, and often we don't even know what we said. So imagine if you could just say ouch. And ouch means I found that offensive, but educate means you got to tell me why. So I don't do it again to offend you or somebody else. Take risks. Today's your chance, folks. Anything you want to talk about today, I am more than happy to entertain, as long as it's on these topics. And the last is to expect unfinished business. I've got a lot of tools in my trainer toolkit. I don't have a magic wand. So at the end of this, I can't dub you culturally competent or bias free or any of those things. It's a process. And it's something that we all have to work through, and hopefully together. So what is diversity? We say diversity, and when we say diversity, the first two bullet points are the first things that come up for you: your ethnic group, your race, your color, your national origin. But diversity is gender. I think we'll all agree that men and women are not just alike. Diversity is age. We have, in any of our places of worship, any of our church, any of our workplaces, any place we gather, we could have like 5 generations working. We've got the senior generation that's over 75. We've got the baby boomers, which is where I live. We've got the millennials, and we like to say those millennials like it's a curse word. You millennials have heard it, I'm sure. Then we have Generation X and Y. And then even in the workplace, we're beginning to have Generation Z. And Z is 18 to, I believe they go up to 20 today. That's a lot of differences in thought. That's a lot of differences in how we view the world. That's a lot of differences in how we dress, how we think about going to work. This Zoom world is great for the younger people. They're loving life because this is what they're accustomed to. Many of us are like hating it because, we want to be there in person. Obviously, I'm here with unity. Religion is diversity. I often tell the story that I grew up in the Episcopal Church. I was having a conversation the other day with Father Burl Salmon over at Bethesda by the Sea, who's wonderful. And I told him that I was a recovering Episcopalian, and he chuckled. I grew up in the Episcopal Church, and the Episcopal Church, as you know, is an hour long. If it goes to an hour and 7 minutes, people are restless. Since I've lived here, I've joined Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church. If it was an hour, we would think there was something wrong. We'd like to get out in 2. It'd be wonderful if we could get out in 2. So religion is diversity. Some of us worship on Saturday, some Sunday, some Friday, some add Wednesday, some for an hour, some all day, some not at all. So when we talk religion, we have to know that we're coming from many different places. Mental and physical ability. We tend to think that the people with mental disabilities are the people on the side of the road with their belongings in a shopping cart, and they're not. We have people in our midst every day that are dealing with some type of therapy or medication to calm their mental disabilities. And we might not look at that as diversity, but they certainly do. Physical ability, I always refer to my brother. I have a kid brother who gets mad when I say kid brother. By the way, I owe him a phone call. I just said that. Keith is 25 years ago, Keith dove into a swimming pool and misjudged the pool and became a quad instantly. He was 6'4", so it was a tough hit for him when he hit the pool. He's great. He lives in a wheelchair. Has the best sense of humor of anybody I know. He lives in Augusta, so we get together every once in a while in Atlanta for a weekend. And he always points something out to me. We go into a restaurant to eat. The hostess never asks him how many in the party or where we want to sit. They ask the standing person because they don't know how to talk to the person in the chair. And he always says, you know, it's my mind it's my legs that are gone, not my mind. So we have to realize how we treat people with disabilities. We make it accessible for them, but how do we talk to them and interact with them, or do we? Sexual orientation and gender identity. When I first started doing this work, I was talking about LGBT. As I moved further in, it was LGBTQ. Q being queer or questioning. I can't say queer because I grew up knowing that to be a slur. My friends in Compass tell me it's acceptable, but it still doesn't work for me. But that's the Q. And the last acronym I'm using we're using is LGBTQIA, which is intersex and asexual. That's 10 to 11% of our population. And we are much better, particularly in the workplace, which is where I do most of my training, on not making Black jokes and Jewish jokes and Polish jokes. We're not so good about gay jokes. I hear things all the time, and it makes me crazy. Just little things like, you know, oh, that's so gay. What does that mean? And who are you offending? That person, their siblings, their parent, their children. So we have to be very mindful of what comes out of our mouths. One thing I did leave out on physical ability is neurodiversity. And that was brought up to me by a woman in a training that I did who has a child on the autism spectrum. And that is, most of us don't think about neurodiversity, but if you are on that spectrum or live with somebody who is, or raising somebody who is, that's a definite diversity.
Yes.
Where can you go? What's open to you? What's available? I found out recently that we have playgrounds in Palm Beach County that are built for people on the autism spectrum, which I think is amazing. And then family and marital status is diversity. So the diversity we're looking at on this screen is legal diversity. These are the things that are protected classes. These are the areas that are most likely looked at marginalized people. This is the stuff that people get in trouble for in the workplace. But there's more to diversity.
Go to the email.
There's level of education is diversity. People put themselves apart from others based on either where they went to school or how much education they have, experience, what you've done through your life. Socioeconomic status is a big part of diversity. You tend to associate with people in a similar socioeconomic class. It just makes it easier to socialize and do things. But we look up and down at people based on socioeconomics. Size is diversity. I walked into a training one day and I said to a firefighter, "Whoa, how tall are you?" And he said, "I thought you were supposed to be the sensitivity lady." He was about 6'10". And he said every day of his life since he was about 12, people have made comments about his height. It's never just how tall are you. It's how's the air up there? How's the weather up there? Got another zip code. We want to make sure we're all muted. If you are not speaking, I want to put you on mute. I'm hearing some sounds. Thanks. And then one woman said to me one day, "What about weight?" She was very tiny, very petite. And she said, "Why do people think it's okay to call me skinny? If I call somebody fat at work, they're going to send me to HR." You know, so, you know, we have to realize how people view their bodies and the comments that we make about them. The next bullet, I don't even have to touch on. Politics is diversity. I think we know that. If we didn't know it before, we certainly know it now. So, I mean, we have to, and unfortunately, where politics is diversity, you know, I, for years, have had healthy and robust debates with people on the other side of the aisle. And it appears that these days we can't have those healthy and robust debates. It turns to instant hate. All you have to do is mention your party and you are completely shut down. And it's sad, but yet you'll hear through this presentation that I tell on myself a lot. I'm as bad as some people when it comes to political diversity. Like, I don't want to hear it, so we really have to get to the point where we are willing to hear it, and that goes for me as well. Geography, where are you from? I know that's diversity because I'm a New Yorker. I've heard it all. Rude, obnoxious, pushy, don't speak to anybody. Those wretched New Yorkers. I see Craig laughing, but I also see him in a Harlem t-shirt. So, so I'm guessing you get it. So Northerners think Southerners are backwards. Southerners think Northerners are rude, obnoxious. We think Californians are all surfer types or Hollywood people. Texas people, oh God, they got their own world down there. And people from the Midwest are just nice. We just think they're nice. So we have thoughts about people. Now let's localize that. Somebody says, I'm from Boca Raton. You go, oh. Somebody says, I'm from Pahokee. You go, oh. So we have thoughts about people just based on where they live, knowing nothing more about them. Longevity is diversity, how long you've been in the country, how long you've been in the community, how long you've been in your church, your workplace, that's all diversity. Unity Church may be a bit more accepting than the good old Baptist church, but the old sisters and brothers of the Catholic Church, of the Baptist Church, think you know nothing unless you've been there for a minute. So if you're new, you really can't know anything. So just sit down and wait your turn. So we have that in many organizations. Longevity is hugely in diversity. Language, linguistic diversity. We live in South Florida, so we have amazing linguistic diversity, which also means we have amazing difference in accents. I often hear people get teased about their accents. Nobody wants to be teased about their accent. People mimicking, we think it's cute to mimic people's accents. They don't, they're doing the best they can. I've tried to take Spanish lessons for the past forever. Can't learn it, have a terrible accent. But if I do stumble through it, I don't want anybody to laugh at the way I pronounce the word. So we have to be mindful of that as well. So all of you have a personal culture. We all do. It's our relationships, it's our upbringing, it's our language, our tradition, our history, our economics, it's who we are. But we bring that to organizations. You bring your personal culture to your workplace, which is a distinct organizational culture, depending on where you work. You bring it to your church, which is a distinct organizational culture, different from other churches. So I know that Unity Church tends to get folks that may have grown up in other denominations. So they have to learn a whole new culture, of a new church. And, so we all have organizational culture, maybe the community you live in. If you live with an HOA, that's an organizational culture of its very own. So there are lots of different organizational cultures that we float in and out of during the course of our lives with our own personal culture. So that personal culture, we look at it two ways, as having a surface culture and a deep culture. Surface culture is easy, our foods. Our foods are all different from culture to culture. Some of us have foods that other people appreciate, some don't. I just made my New Year's Eve feast recently. Of course, I usually make it for 20 or 30. This year it was for 6, my COVID pod. But I combine my Black Southern roots and my Caribbean roots. So I got oxtails, pig's feet, jerk chicken, peas and rice, collard greens, all the things that folks think about. And that's my culture. So our foods are very different from culture to culture. Our music is very cultural. Think back to Sunfest when we had it. We may see it again someday. Sunfest has 3 stages. I can almost tell you who's going to come on that stage, what entertainment, based on who's standing in front of it waiting to hear them. Because we are very, very distinct in culture and our music. Our holidays. I keep a calendar always of Christian holidays, national holidays, and Jewish holidays, because I live in South Florida and I grew up in New York. So I want to know that I'm not planning a meeting on somebody else's holiday. So I'm very, very conscious of Jewish holidays, particularly because we tend to plan things for Saturday and not understand why people can't come. One year I made a fatal error. I've now expanded my calendar because I planned a food event, a luncheon that was multicultural, and it was in August. And my thought was there is no holiday in August but my birthday. Well, that year it was Ramadan. And Ramadan is a moving target. You got to find it. This year I found it in April. So all my Muslim friends that I invited wouldn't be able to have lunch. So we want to be sure when we live in a multicultural world that we're being careful of multicultural holidays. Clothing, people dress differently based on their culture, folklore, and superstition. Some people have superstitions that are really a part of their lives. A lot of us think superstition is just something silly our grandparents had. My grandmother wouldn't allow you to put a hat on the bed. I don't know what would have happened if you put a hat on the bed, but 60 plus years later, I still can't put a hat on the bed. I don't know what'll happen. I'll never know because I don't put a hat on the bed. But we don't have to subscribe to other people's cultures, but we can't laugh at them. Ceremonies and rites. The one I talk about the most are burial rites. One of my dear friends, Amy, called me one day. Amy's Jewish, and she had to go to one of her Black coworkers lost her father, and she wanted to go pay her respects. And she called me and said, I've been to very few churches in my life. I'm Jewish. She said, I've never been to a Black church. So I need to know what to expect. What am I going to see? And I said, are you going to the wake of the funeral? And she said, the wake. I said, okay, because if you're going to the funeral, I was going to tell you to pack a lunch because you're going to be there for a minute. Mm-hmm. But she said, the wake. So I said, well, that's fine. Just you'll go in, you'll hug your friend. There's no ceremony. I knew what church it was. You'll be fine. Hug your friend, go home. She calls me back an hour and a half later. She is crying out of control. She said, I knew I was going to the wake. I didn't expect to meet the man. Jews are buried by sunset the next day whenever possible, and often not embalmed. And everybody, please mute your line. I love dogs. Everybody, I'm sorry, I lost my train. Oh, Jews are buried by sunset the next day and not often embalmed. She'd never seen an open casket. She was devastated. She said, you think that little fact might have been an important thing to share with me? And why didn't I think to share it? Because it's my expectation. It's what I expect. So when I was telling this story one day, one of my friends who's from the Bahamas said, well, it's a good thing she didn't come to my house because we put the body in the living room, and still do. So there's different rites that we have to understand. Speaking of rites, you all have a ceremony that I absolutely love. So invite me next year. And that's your burning bowl. I went to Del Rey one year and I didn't know what to expect, but it was the most wonderful thing to put what I wanted to put in that bowl and watch it go away. And it was also really cool to get a card in the mail the following year, reminding me of what I said I'd do. That's kind of a little guilt thing going there, but I love that ceremony. So we have to understand one another's ceremonies and rites because they're all different. Courtship and marriage. I have a friend who's from Pakistan. She lives in an arranged marriage. I met her when she first came to this country. Her husband's from South Florida, went to Pakistan through a network, found his bride, brought her home. She's about 32 today, 33. They've got a 6-year-old son, a wonderful marriage. But who would have known that people today are still in arranged marriages, but they are. Health and medicine. If I had time to ask you what kind of things you do to heal yourself to come for your culture, we'd have amazing differences in what we do. My Jamaican friends tell me to chew garlic when my blood pressure goes up to bring down my blood pressure. Another one of my friends brings me beet juice to drink when my blood pressure goes up. I've seen people wrap wounds in banana leaves and plantain leaves. All these things come from our cultures, and there's myriad things that people do to heal themselves. And then gender roles. We have there are still cultures that have very defined male and female roles. This is what men do. This is what women do. and the twain shall not meet. So you think people in the workplace have to do all the same work, but don't think people don't bring it there mentally. Because if they're accustomed to clear-cut male and female gender roles at home, that comes to work in their psyche. It comes to the church in their psyche. It comes wherever you are because that's what they believe. So we're not flat. We're multicultural. We have our language that we speak, how we communicate. I am loud and expressive. You know, my culture, my family culture is loud and expressive. I have a dear friend who's Japanese. My best friend actually lives in Honolulu. At least one person on this Zoom knows him. And he always said to me, "Oh, you would have driven my parents crazy." They were very Japanese, very quiet, very reserved. They still bowed to one another. He said, when you came bursting into the living room all loud, they would have lost their mind because his culture was very quiet. Our courtesies. When I moved to South Florida, I had to learn Miss Barbara. My friends' kids were calling me Miss Barbara. I'm like, what is that? Do they have to call me Miss Barbara? And the answer was yes, because that's respect. And I wasn't accustomed to that. You didn't miss anything in New York. So, I mean, I wasn't used to that. Our rituals, we've talked about the roles we play in our communities, our customs, you know, how do you celebrate Christmas in your family or Hanukkah? Or how do you celebrate Thanksgiving or Easter or Passover? Our relationships, how we relate to our community and our family. Is yours a hierarchical family where the elder makes the decisions? Some families are. No matter how big the family is, the family elder still decides what the family does. Our practices, when's dinner? Is it at 5 o'clock? Is it at 8 o'clock? Is it we all have to sit together and pray first? Or is it grab something and keep moving? You know, it's your family's custom. Expected behaviors. In some families, kids are seen and not heard. In some cultures, kids are a part of the decision-making process. So it depends on your culture, your values, and how we interact. So when you meet somebody, you got all this going on. So we talk about isms. I mean, there's just so much to who we are, and we just look at what we can see. If we were in person, I would have put an iceberg on the wall, very much like this one here, and I would have given you all 3 Post-it notes and told you to put on each Post-it note an aspect of your culture from something we've talked about before up until this point on 3 different Post-it notes. And then I would ask you to go into the iceberg, and if what you wrote we can see about you, if it's something we can see, I would ask you to put it above the waterline. If it's something we can't see, I would ask you to put it below the waterline. 85% of the Post-it notes, no matter where I do this, come out below the waterline. Because all I can see is your race and your gender. And I might guess your race wrong. I've done it before. So most of who we are is hidden, but that's the significance of who we are. You know, I can't see your religion. I can't see your sexual orientation. I can't see if you're married or single. I can't see any of that, but I can. But we judge people on only what we can see. So look at how much we're missing before we decide who somebody is. So when cultures come together, very often we have what's called cultural bumps. So very often those isms aren't as much isms as cultural bumps. Let's say the cultural bumps can leave you confused. Let's say it's about language and you don't understand the accent or the words. That can leave you confused. Let's say the cultural bump is about time. We as Americans are extremely conscious of time. We said we were starting at 10 o'clock today, and we started at 10:02. And I'm sure that seemed late for some of you because we're very conscious of time. I spent a lot of time in the Caribbean. Not so much. It happens when it happens. And they're fine. Nobody's upset. Meeting was going to start at 10. It really started at 10:25. What's the big deal? So that cultural bump, if it's about time, you leave you frustrated. If you're accustomed to doing it one way, the other person's doing it another. Cultural bump can leave you angry. Let's say it's the culture of politics. You're very angry. Can leave you misunderstood if you leave the encounter not knowing what happened. And on the outside, that cultural bump can leave you helpless and hopeless. Excuse me, dry mouth. Um, the example I've been using lately of helpless and hopeless came from a firefighter. Female firefighter came on the scene of a car accident, and she goes immediately to the person who seems to be most in trauma, which is a man. And the whole time she's trying to treat him, he's backing away from her. And she's trying to help him, and he's backing away. And finally, one of the women in the car, who was lucid enough to tell her, said he's a Muslim. He cannot be touched by anybody who's not his wife, by a woman who's not his wife. It's a sin. So she was quick enough to get a male medic in to take over. But imagine the helplessness and hopelessness of this man and what they were both feeling at that moment. So these cultures, very often when something happens to me, particularly in public with someone I don't know, and it becomes a confusing, frustrating, angry, or helpless situation, I begin to look at it as a cultural bump. It's not them, it's not me, it's just a cultural bump. Our cultures are colliding at that point. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what implicit bias is, because I think that helps you get to the root of the isms. And basically, it's implicit social cognition. It's a new field. It's not a new concept, however. It's how we look at people and the biases that we have that we don't know we have. So you all have biases. I used to say, raise your hand if you don't have a bias, but I don't want you to lie. So we've all got them. Some of them are explicit. If I asked you right now what your explicit biases were, you could write them down. If I said, give me 3 of your biases, you can write them down. You might not want to, but you could. It could be people from that certain neighborhood that you were told to stay away from when you were 12. It could be people that you see on TV that you just have a bias against. It could be old people. You're driving on 95, you're in the left-hand lane, and the person in front of you is going 40. You're sure it's a senior citizen. You know, I used to say that too, but I'm getting my COVID vaccine today. So I guess I'm a senior citizen too. So I'm a little bit more tolerant. But we have those explicit biases that we know we have, but we also have implicit biases. And those are the ones that you don't know you have. And those are the ones that are frightening. So the social scientist Daniel Kahneman has a book, and Daniel Kahneman says we have 2 brains, a system 1 brain and a system 2 brain. System 1 is always running, always. System 1 is effortless, it's fast, it's patterns and associations, it's your unconscious mind. It's also your fight or I can never say this, fight or flight. If you get in the ocean and you see a fin, system 1 gets you out of the ocean. It makes you don't want to stop and think, gee, I wonder what that is. You want to get the hell out of the ocean. So that's what system 1 does for you. System 2 is your conscious brain. It takes work. It's slow. It's conscious. It's also lazy. It doesn't want to work. It would be happy to let system 1 take over. Our parents all told us somewhere along the line, treat everybody the way you would want to be treated, the good old-fashioned golden rule. That still lives in your system 2 brain. But your system 1 brain just makes patterns and associations and takes over. And I'll give you an example. I was in Publix the other day, and I got my phone in my hand. I'm doing what I usually do, either reading emails, texting, or playing words with friends, because I'm in a grocery line. And all of a sudden, I happen to look up, and the woman in front of me has a full cart and 3 kids. And my first thought is, why does she have all those sweet, unhealthy things in that cart with those 3 children? Well, that wasn't my conscious mind. I don't know her or her children. I could care less what they eat. But my unconscious mind went straight to her groceries. So I tagged it as that, and I look away because I don't want to look at it anymore. And the next thought I have is, why does that woman have turquoise hair? So I didn't decide to look at her hair. My unconscious mind just saw the turquoise hair. So those are our implicit mind. Now, if you've ever taken a psychology class, you were told that 95 to 98% of what you process is processed in your unconscious mind. Your conscious mind only manages 2 to 5%. So if your implicit biases live in your unconscious mind, what does that tell you? They're running all day long without your permission. So you don't have to stop and think Your implicit mind just takes over. That, folks, is where our isms come from. This is a picture from Kahneman's book, and I always use it because I think it's awesome. It's system one running out front with system two trying to catch up. System one is that mind that says, did I really just say that out loud? You've all done that at some point. I say system one is my mind that speaks before system two can tell it to shut up. So we have to be mindful that system one takes over for system two. And always remember that system two is lazy and doesn't particularly want to work. So I've used bias a couple of times. What is it? It's prejudice in favor of or against something. And you'll notice that it says in favor of first. We always look at our biases as against, or our prejudices as against, not necessarily. Any of you have grandchildren? I'm going to promise you that you think they're perfect. Your kids aren't perfect, but your grandchildren are. Yeah, see you smiling. So that's prejudice or bias. And it may be unfair, it may be one-sided, but it's bias. So we have to be mindful that our biases, our prejudice, not only have us put people away from us, but pull people toward us. When I'm in the workplace, I talk about this a lot because that favorable bias can very easily make you hire or promote somebody who is not as good for the job as somebody else, but they're more of a cultural match to you and you trust them more. So that positive bias can be just as detrimental as a negative bias, particularly in a place like the workplace. So your explicit biases, again, can be consciously detected. You know what they are. Your implicit ones are unconscious associations that do not necessarily align with your conscious beliefs. You can easily not believe you have that bias because consciously you don't. Unconsciously, however, you do. So where's it come from? We categorize people based on our beliefs about groups or classes of people. We may have never met somebody from a Muslim country that we are told is a terrorist for us to believe that they're terrorists because our implicit biases are there. These things are well established and programmed through our culture, our parents, our peers, through the media, and through our experiences. Our experiences have a lot to do with it. If you have 5 bad experiences with somebody of one type, the 6th person that you meet of that type, they're going to be hard pressed to make you think that they're not the prior 5. I have the media in there because the media feeds our stereotypes. I'll give you 2 examples. I happened to be in Tampa a couple of years ago working when a man in New York City ran his car up onto somewhere on the west side of New York and wiped out a bunch of bicyclists and joggers and walkers and people just out for the afternoon. I happened to be in Tampa. He happened to be from Tampa and he happened to be Muslim. By the 6 o'clock news in Tampa, they were in front of the imam at 2 different mosques, asking why they thought this terrorist had run over people in New York City. When the young kids shot up the Black AME church in Charleston, I didn't see anybody standing in front of Methodist church or the Presbyterian church asking why they thought he did that. But they do it for the Muslims. So the media is feeding our bias every single day. Let's use career bias, law enforcement. I was training a group of cops recently and I said to them, you guys have such a bad reputation these days. This is a department in Broward County. I said, did anybody in this department do anything to feed the bad impression people have of law enforcement today? And they said, absolutely not. We're a very friendly force. I believe them. I said, but can you agree that some of your colleagues around the country have done some pretty awful things that make people have this bad impression? They said, oh, yeah. I said, so do you think we're painting everybody with the same broad brush? They said, yeah, that's not fair. I said, no, it isn't. But how many groups of people do you paint with the same broad brush? Kind of goes both ways. But the media has given us a very bad view of law enforcement. If there's a police shooting today, you're going to see it 17 times tonight. So you're going to think there was 17 shootings because it's over and over and over. And that just feeds the misperception that people have of law enforcement officers. I'm going to say that I've been training cops for 18 years. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say 85% of the cops are awesome. But we saw 15% of the ones that weren't. We saw the 85% that were awesome getting their butts kicked last week at the Capitol. But we also saw the 15% that are 15% not so good, allowing that to happen. You know, so we have to really look at how we judge people based on what the media shows us. So remember that we all have biases. So it's how we process and organize information. Doesn't make it right or wrong. But our biases strongly predict and inform our actions. So we have to really remember that if you're unconscious, implicit bias or informing your actions, we might be in trouble. If we take our implicit biases that we don't know we have, our explicit biases that we're very aware of, and our institutional forces, I believe that they mutually reinforce long-standing social inequities, and I believe that's what we're seeing on TV today. We are seeing 400 years of people's implicit and explicit biases and institutional forces coming to a head that have had societal inequities that won't end. And that's what we're seeing in front of our faces. So remember that our implicit biases are involuntarily activated. We can pretty much monitor what we say. We're pretty good at political correctness, but sometimes it kind of leaks out. You know, they leak out in the woman who grabs her purse because she's afraid of the black guy walking toward her on the sidewalk. Or the person who just assumes that I was in Target the other day and saw 3 women walking through who were Muslim, who had the full black garb, and the whispers around were just intolerable. And my first thought was, my God, they're so brave to come out at a Target, middle America store. So things tend to leak out very easily. And the good news is bias doesn't make you prejudiced, it makes you human. But it doesn't mean that we can't work to combat it in some way. I'm going to spend a little bit of time, because I want to leave us some time to chat. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about microaggressions. So I'm going to quickly tell you that microaggressions are just commonplace daily things that people say that can be communicated as hostile and derogatory, may or may not be meant that way, but come out that way. And they happen every single day. And they typically happen against groups that are marginalized. So who do I consider marginalized groups? In this country these days, Blacks, Hispanics, some places women, immigrants, people with disabilities. So the things that people say. And the next few slides, I know the slides are a little bit behind my voice, are young kids who are asked, these are teenagers, high school kids who've been asked what microaggression they often hear. And this one pretty little girl says, "What are you?" She hears, and she says, "I'm human. Being biracial doesn't make me a what." I have a friend who has a white woman who has 2 biracial grandchildren, and she said she was walking one of them down the street one day, and a neighbor said, "Oh, he's adorable. What is he?" So what she really wanted to nosily find out was what his ethnicity was and how she got a brown grandchild. But then ask that if you're that nosy. Don't say what, don't reduce him to a what. And people say that all the time. You know, what are you? The next one is a young man who says, "You don't act like a normal Black person, you know?" I've heard that before. This young man said he was from like Oklahoma and he loved rodeos and country western. And when he moved to another city, people went, "Well, they don't seem like a normal Black person." And he wanted to know what normal was supposed to be. The next young lady, Courtney, says, "I never see you as a Black girl." And the person says, well, she says, "Well, then open your eyes." Because I am. And I've heard that 1,000 times in my life from well-meaning white friends. But I don't see you as Black, really. One of my favorites, if I were going to hold a sign, it would be either "I don't see color" or "I'm colorblind." Because when somebody says to me, "I don't see color," my head starts spinning. Because to tell me you don't see color tells me you don't see 60 plus years of my existence, which is very different from 60 plus years that a white woman has spent. So I know that I don't see color means I don't treat you differently based on your color, but it really is a microaggression, because what it really says is you don't see me. and we just don't realize that. This young lady says, just because I'm Mexican doesn't mean I should be the automatic choice for the role of Dora Explorer in the high school skit. She also goes on to say that every time we go out to lunch, that doesn't mean I want to go for Mexican food. I might want to go for sushi. You know, we make these sweeping assumptions as to what people want or what they like. The next one I love, she says, you don't speak Spanish with a big question mark. She's got a Latino surname. She's never been to the country of her roots. Her parents were both born in the United States, and so was she. She does not speak Spanish. In fact, she said she took German in school. And everybody that she said she gets it from both sides. Spanish speaking people are mad because she can't speak to them. English speaking people are mad because she can't translate or interpret for them, but she does not speak Spanish. And why should she be expected to just because her last name is Spanish? And the last one, oh no, not the last one, the second to the last, this little guy says, my limited representation of my race in your classroom does not make me the voice for all Black people. Remember, one of my first ground rules was we can't speak for, or we have to speak for ourselves, not for others. I can't tell you what all Black people like. And I will tell you that I made the same microaggression recently. I said to a very good friend of mine who's Jamaican, the Jamaicans must be really happy because you're about to have a half Jamaican Vice President of the United States. And he said, Barbara, I have no idea. I did not ask all Jamaican people. Ouch. And he was absolutely right. And the last young lady says, so you're Chinese, right? She's not. She said, why couldn't I be Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese? She said, for some reason, Americans default to Chinese. She doesn't know why. They just do. They don't think any other Asian country. They just go straight to China. And one of my friends from the Bahamas says that Americans default to Jamaican. They hear an accent, they say Jamaican. And I laughed recently because somebody said to me, have you met the new police chief in West Palm Beach? He's Jamaican. I said, actually, he's from the Bahamas. But that was, again, that's what I saw about that default, you know, and we do things like that. So why does this matter anyway? Why do we do this? Why do I teach this regularly? Because we're all subject to unconscious bias that comes from the larger society and historical discrimination. And if you can understand your implicit bias, it's going to improve your interactions with people all day long and give you the skills to recognize your bias and some strategies to combat it. And how do we combat it? With education. You know, you're starting now with the education. Accountability. Keep yourself accountable. You know, find an accountability partner. You're all together. You will make really good accountability partners for one another. Tell people when they're saying things. The same way the guy got me on the Jamaican thing the other day. Be willing to tell your colleagues when they say something that sounds like a microaggression or an implicit bias. Deliberative processing. Think about how we look at other people. Think about stereotypes people might have about you, and how would you feel about that? Counter stereotyping. Think about examples that show the stereotype to be inaccurate. I always laughingly say, you can say, all New Yorkers aren't rude because we know Barbara, she's not rude. But first you have to identify it as a stereotype, label it as a stereotype, figure out how you got it, and then replace it with something. And then individuation, realizing that people's race and gender and age and culture are just one facet of who they are. I firmly believe that one of the most important tools in your toolbox is being aware of implicit bias and be motivated to make what's unconscious conscious, so you realize what your biases are. So we're a society that's been structured from top to bottom by race. You can't get beyond it by deciding not to talk about it anymore. It'll always come back. It'll always reassert itself over and over and over again. So that is my little spiel on biases and isms. And looks like we have a little time left. If anybody has a question, comment, thought, go for it. You're not all that quiet, I know. Just go ahead, Hamza. I see your hand.
Barbara, this thing about microaggression, I was not familiar with the word. However, and this goes back a while, in the 60s, I was attending an all-white girls' school, it was a private school. with the exception of me. And I was asked to, the Watts riots broke out. I was asked to go around to every classroom and explain to them what the Watts riots was about. And I ended up leaving that school mid-school year because I said to them that, you know, I wasn't the representation of what the Watts riots was about, that I was attending that school to get an education and nothing more. So this goes way back.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't have a word for it, but I knew it wasn't right.
Oh, yeah. It goes way back for many of us. And, you know, I'm glad it has a word because it makes people think about it.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yes, Barbara, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I was waiting for you to hit something that did not apply to me. Something that I could say, oh, that's not me. And
Did you find it?
no. So the work I have to do, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? You folks aren't that quiet. I know you're not.
Barbara, this may seem a little off topic, but is this in a book? Have you published a book with your presentations? And
Nah, I keep talking about it.
Valuable.
I keep talking about it. It's on my list one of these days.
The way that you presented it, and it's just so concise and clear. And that, I mean, I heard you present many years ago, but
yeah,
it's just, it just stirred inside of me. So I would love it if you would, like, even like a workbook type of thing.
yeah.
I would just absolutely relish having that. So
thank you.
This was
It's
really.
It's on my list.
Can I just give one funny little example that
absolutely.
I don't see a lot of television, but I've seen a commercial a couple times recently, and maybe some of you have seen it. And I was actually surprised that I was still offended. It's a commercial with Simone Biles and this very flamboyantly gay man. There are a couple of them, and it's done by Uber Eats, I think. It is so intensely offensive.
I don't know if I've seen it.
He's very, very, like, he is left of Randy Rainbow. I mean, he's just like so flamboyantly gay. And they play it up in such a way that it's remarkable that we're still doing that.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was just surprised that it still hit me after a lot of years of work, that something like that, number one, would still be presented. And I think, you know, Donald, my husband, Donald Kavanaugh.
Oh, yeah.
So he's done a lot of work around it. So he would say that we're the last frontier, like it's still okay to say things about gay people. Though most groups are exempt now, that it's still okay. And I say, I don't know that that's true. But then when I saw this commercial, I went,
yeah,
oh God, you would not do that with. So well, anyway, I just wanted to, because that commercial immediately came to mind when you said that I was still capable of being like, what the hell is that? Really?
You heard me say in the beginning that in the workplace, it's a lot, people aren't telling Black jokes and Jewish jokes, but I hear the gay jokes every place I go in the workplace, always. And it's bad. But I will tell you something this year. I found hope this year. Two things I found hope in: commercials and Hallmark. I don't watch Hallmark movies because I call Hallmark white TV. It makes me crazy. I can't. There were no Black people in Hallmark like forever. And so, but this year, their Christmas movies were really multicultural, even cross-cultural. It was like this Black woman who was a baker. She baked cookies and she fell in love with this mystery white guy. It was very cool. And commercials, the Black gay couple that goes home for Christmas, yes, and the family gets them a Christmas decoration with two of their names on it.
Yeah.
That blew me away. You know, Black families, gay acceptance. I thought that was huge.
And the HIV commercial is a little bit stereotyped,
Oh
but
yeah,
had the
it
two
is.
Black guys kissing at the end.
Yeah, having dinner on the roof. And
God,
that
they
kiss-
just put that in front of all of America.
Yeah, I don't. That doesn't bother me, but it bothers America, and I'm sure they should have thought about that. The candlelight dinner on the roof was one thing. The kiss at the end was like, yeah, did you have to go that far?
Yeah. But they wouldn't say that if it was a straight couple, right?
No, no, exactly. But they are. But we know how Middle America thinks. So that dog whistle, which is what we've been hearing a word a lot lately. There's a lot of that. That's a dog whistle because that will offend enough people, and to determine the way they vote and how they respond to people, and that's unfair. You know, I think all these commercials, many years ago, I looked at some stuff that the United Way put out here. I was on the United Way board, and they put together their annual campaign. And the campaign logo was 3 hands, one black, one white, one brown. And the black hand was on the bottom, the brown in the middle, the white on top. And I just flipped. Because I said, not only is a black hand on the bottom, the white hand's holding them both down. And had you shown that to a Black person, we would have told you that. So if they had shown that commercial to you, somebody would have said, yeah, maybe not. You know, so I just don't know who looks at these things before they go out, which always kind of makes you go, eh.
Anyway, thank you. I'm waiting for your book.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, hi, Barbara. This is Gurinam. I have a question for you. It seems to me that one of, what I think is one of the best strategies for, getting past some of these isms and separations is circumstances that can bring people of diversity together more, to learn more about each other, to see each other as people, to become friends.
Yep.
Do you have, and yet, birds of a feather flock together, and it's easier to be with your own culture and hang out with friends that, you don't have to explain things to and all of that. So do you have some strategically good ways to bring people together for, healing, harmony, upliftment, all of that good stuff?
I'm looking at it right now on the screen. I mean, that's what I see. And that's, this is the answer. I mean, we all know that I think Martin Luther King was the first to say that Sunday morning at 11 o'clock is the most segregated time of the week, because that's where we both go our separate ways. So I mean, so you're there. I mean, I'm looking at what you're doing here. It's workplace. It's bringing kids together, but it's also talking about it. Just being together isn't enough. Ibram Kendi says in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, it's not enough to be. It's not enough to not be racist. You have to be an anti-racist. So it's not just being together, but it's being together and having the conversations, and then taking those conversations outside of your group to other people in your lives. We very often, we tend to say we're preaching to the choir. So I could say easily right now on this screen, I'm preaching to the choir, but the choir is not going to sound so good unless the choir practices. So the choir's got to be singing from the same sheet of music, and they got to practice from time to time, or they will not sing well together. So just to hear this once a year and not talk about it constantly. I'm a news junkie, sadly. I really wish I could, for the next 4 days, turn off MSNBC, but I know it's not going to happen. But one of the commentators the other night was he was doing his commentary based on hearing sermons around the country this past Sunday. And he had gone to listen to tapes of conservative white evangelical services around the country, and then Black Baptist services around the country, and comparing what preachers were saying this past Sunday after what happened Wednesday. And these are church people. So the differences were happening in the pulpit. Each group was talking about the other in a derogatory fashion from the pulpit. So, and mine is no exception. So where does it start? It starts with those of you who are preaching the word in your congregation, but you have to constantly preach it, and you have to find a way to talk about these things. Nothing happens by osmosis. We didn't get separated overnight, and we're not going to get united overnight. It takes work. Yes, I have to.
I have to slap myself on the wrist. One of the things you said early on had to do with millennials.
Oh.
And I guess maybe it's my age group, boomer, that millennials came on the scene and we started using that word. And yes, it's derogatory.
No,
And I
the
never
word's
thought of
not.
it in that way.
The word's
I
not.
really didn't.
The word's not derogatory at all. That's what they are. But it's the way we say it.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you brought that awareness to my consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
Because I didn't realize that that was the way it was perceived.
Yeah, that's the way.
So thank
It's
you for
the
that
way.
new knowledge.
Thank you. It's the way we say it. It's the same way that young people say old people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody told me the other day somebody was old. I said, how old? She said 72. Well, I'm 68. So I was like, oh, they ain't old. And Barbara.
Yeah, two things. First is you showed at one of the images you showed as one of the aides, teaching aides, was at a round table. And I like that image because we tend to look at situations, people, anything, usually vertical, who's on top and whatnot. And I have been thinking recently, changing my perspective to look at everybody at a on horizontal, but better still at a round table, in a circular. But you were talking about the old age. I travel with a group, and we have our seniors programs on a Tuesday, which we can't do now. But when people come and calling us all, you call us senior, and we say, we get very offended. The only time we own up to being seniors if something is free.
That's right.
Or we can move to the front of the line. Otherwise, don't be focusing on the fact that I'm a senior.
I want every discount thing I can get. I earn these discounts. I do a lot of my work in circles. A lot of our training is that I talk about Racial Equity Institute. We do that work in a circle. I went, and Taylor, I want to say the first time I ever met you was with not Unity Church, but with in Lake Worth, with the group in Lake Worth. That's what's the church?
Well, we met at my Interfaith Collective, but also at Lake Worth Interfaith Network.
Yeah, where did they meet? They met at it's not, my brain is saying Quaker, but it's not Quaker. It's
well, there's a Quaker house. We met there, but we also met in a private school where I have my community.
Okay, the Quaker house is the Quaker Friends meeting room is what I'm thinking about.
Yes.
And they were in a circle. And I was one of the first time, and I think that's very cool. Yeah. I remember not knowing there was a Quaker Friends meeting room in Lake Worth. I was like blown away. I'm kidding me. So yeah, Marie, you're muted.
I know, I'm 72, I'm old. I apologize, we had problems with our internet and getting on was a little bit of a job, but I just wanted sort of anecdotally. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania in the 50s and 60s. And not only first of all, we had hardly any Black people in the town, and they lived in the one section of town. And not only was my family prejudiced for Black people, but if you weren't Italian, forget about it. If you weren't Catholic, I had a girlfriend that was Protestant. When they found out she was Protestant, they wouldn't let me see her.
Yeah.
So my teenage years, I started to meet more people in different circumstances. And I remembered liking this Black boy, he wasn't a man yet, and we went out and he had to drop me off on the corner a block away from my house because God forbid my father saw me, Now, here's the best part of the story. My sister, later on in time, presented my father with a biracial grandson. And it is amazing what it did. It blew his mind. It was like, it blew his mind to put it back together.
Yeah.
And he became his favorite. And he was a member of AA and he would go to meetings, my father. And if anybody ever said a Black joke or something discouraging, he would jump on them. And I used to think, who is this man? This is the guy that brought me up. So, you know, it's in all of us, in our history and our past. And I think the kids coming up now, like my grandson, has a big variety of friends, Black, brown, everything. And I'm hoping, and he has a little disability, which he has overcome. He has a deformed hand. And he's the most popular kid in class. So I hope this generation is the best. And thank you for putting this on today. And I'm glad I was able to get on. Thank you.
So Maria, I have one question about Scranton.
Okay.
So do you know Joe Biden?
Actually, we know his brother. We actually know his brother. Jerry, you could pipe up. Where are you? Yes, we know his brother.
Okay. I mean, Scranton is Joe Biden these days.
I know. Yeah, Scranton's the office. It's a lot of things.
I love it. I hear that story a lot about white men, particularly who get interracial grandchildren who suddenly change completely. That completely changes their mind. But I have to tell you that it's no different. My stepfather, I dated Bob Levithan, who was Jewish. He had to drop me off at the corner because my stepfather was not having it. And he got very upset because I dated 2 white men in a row. He said, can't you find a brown man? So I brought home Jose Rodriguez. He didn't like that either. So I guess I've been doing this work since I was a kid. Donna, I saw your hand.
Hi, Barbara. Yes, well, I had vowed to be only an observer this morning, but I feel compelled to tell you how much I appreciate what you've said and the way you've said it. I, as a retired anthropologist, I went around the country talking to teachers for the Center for Students Placed at Risk on cultural differences. And I wish, as Taylor has said, I'd had your book because you put it so succinctly and so clearly, and I really appreciate the way you have put it. And do write your book.
Oh,
even though I'm retired, I'd read it.
Thank you. Retired anthropologist. How cool. Do you know we have a local Black anthropologist who's a very cool woman named Dr. Alicia Wynn.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's doing a lot of work here in the community. She's phenomenal. I always said she was the first anthropologist I ever met.
Oh, I would love to meet her myself. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for what you've done. It was wonderful.
Sure, thank you. Hey, yeah, Bonnie.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I think this is so invaluable, and I can envision us doing, once we are able to get in the physical space, asking you to come in and look at me taking Taylor's role, but asking you to come in and do something for us as a church as a whole. I think it would be very powerful and invaluable for the congregation.
Thank you. Thank you. This is my ministry. Trish.
So I wanted to thank you for adding the neurodivergent or the neuro differently wired in because my son is on the Asperger spectrum. And I know that his psychologist jokes that he has Asperger's light because it can be kind of difficult to tell he's just quirky. But I know that we have run into that a lot. And people, once they have heard, if they've heard before they've met him, they have expectations of what he's going to be like. And then I can't tell you how many people have said to me, oh, well, he seems so normal. And, they figure that that's nice or whatever that is. And I'm thinking, well, no, he is normal. He's, he is him. But, and if you ever write your book, I have gone through self-publishing. I'd be happy to take you through that process.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
Okay.
I even have a title for it. One of these days it'll happen.
You can do it. You can do it.
Okay.
It's not as hard as you think.
All right, folks. Are we there?
I would like to know, do you have your contact information? I would love you to join us one Sunday, the second Sunday of the month, with coming to the table.
Oh, I'd be happy to. So will you share it with Barbara?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I put in another plug for Barbara Cheives? She did this for Leadership Palm Beach County and I participated. And so I
Yeah.
went through the exact same thing today and it was totally different.
Oh,
So-
how fun.
Well, because you have this ability to speak to your crowd. And so I didn't feel like it was a repeat or
Oh,
anything.
good.
It was just
That's
wonderful.
right. It was the exact same slide deck. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any other questions,
I would
or
just like to add one more
comments.
thing, Ahimsa, may I?
Okay, sure.
I just want to plug this in for everyone to consider. I'm the current mouthpiece for Unity of the Palm Beaches. But so Bonnie, you're on the board and Linda's our board president. And so it really is your place to say something about having Barbara come in. You're not taking my role. And there was something I would like to add in terms of, I don't know that it would be termed a bias. In our 501c3 for Unity of the Palm Beaches, it is called a church. And I find that just personally an unfortunate term for what we really are. We are a community. We are not a church, because a church, we don't have a denomination because that implies Christianity. And so we're not, though we are governed by principles that originally were more Christian focused, but in very non-traditional ways. And so as soon as we say that we're a church, we have just made ourselves exclusive. So we meet at a temple, which I think is fabulous. So we really are a community where people from various faiths can come together to celebrate the power of spirit, which, God does not have a religion. So I think it's important that that's a bias that perhaps at least this group could work to let go of the term church, which I never used it. And then when I was saturated in Unity for a while, I started using the term, and now I'm having to back up and try to shift that again because I grew up in the evangelical church. But as soon as you say church, you've just put people outside of the doors. So I want to bring it back to, we are a community, and we would love to have Barbara Cheives come in and speak to the entire community.
Happy to. You no longer, you don't have the church on Flagler anymore?
No, that building was let go of what, Linda, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago?
2011.
Okay. I used to do Toastmasters in that building.
Yes, back in that, I went to some of those.
Yeah, we've been at Temple Israel now for a number of years. Which
is, that's the group I met with last night, was Temple Israel.
Exactly. So it's a great fit. It's a great.
Yeah. Oh, good. They're wonderful.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So anyway, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to plug that in because for me, when I hear church, I go, no, we're not really a church. So.
And also, Taylor, you may remember in New York, it was never a church. It was a center. It was the Unity Center.
Never a church. Unity New York.
Right. Is Unity? So Unity is not a denomination.
No.
The churches are all connected, though. I mean,
we're autonomous, but under the same umbrella, but we're all autonomous. So
okay.
Different flavor, usually based on the leader.
Okay.
I don't think that's as much. Well. Yeah, so
gotcha.
we are under a number. It's called Practical Christianity, but that has even evolved now on the campus of Unity Village. There are now 2 Buddhist sanghas. So we're really progressing. So it's really quite wonderful to watch it.
Cool. Thank you. Well, it's been a joy. Thank you for having me.
Before you leave, speaking of the different unities, you were talking about the Episcopal Church and the Christian Church. Well, I went to Unity Church in Guyana, and it was like, I think they lasted like something like 4.5 hours long. I couldn't believe I was in a Unity part of the church, but
I could do that.
I don't know how many hymns we sang.
Sounds like they were really engaged.
Yeah. Very.
Well, I'm sure that Reverend Taylor could be as engaged. He is definitely engaging every time we come together. We really appreciate that. Yes. And Barbara, you were terrific today. I'd like to
Thank
thank
you.
you on behalf of our congregation for showing up and showing out.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks much. Have
Thank
a
you so
great
much.
Saturday, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Barbara,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
you're born in August. Are you a Leo?
I am.
So am I.
When's your birthday?
August 15.
Ah, mine's the 12th.
Mine's the 17th.
Mine's the 16th.
Oh,
Ah,
goodness.
Lots of
11.
Libras.
We have a
Lot of
Leo club
Libras.
going here.
Wow.
I'm a
My
Leo
daughter's
too,
the
but I'm in
16th.
July.
Yep, my daughter's August 16th.
Reverend
as well.
Elwell, feel better, and prayers to your partner, your husband.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, they're thinking of you, lifting you up.
Love seeing you all.
Thank you.
And
Wes.
Barbara, can you make me the host again? Because we've been recording this and I want to make sure that I can encapsulate the recording. So
Yep.
Thank you so much.
And Barbara Walker, if you
Yeah.
can
I can pull-
give Trish your number so that I can get in touch with you.
Oh, definitely.
Oh,
Definitely.
here it is.
Yeah, actually, I've got her email and everything. I'll link the two of you.
Okay, thank you.
And Diane does too. She's on it.
All right.
Okay, Trish, you should have it back now.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm gonna leave because I didn't want to end before because I was host.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.